Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome back to Basketball Conference, the ACC Football Podcast. My name is Joey Weaver. He is Mike McDaniel. Mike, we are kicking off preview season. We have waited long enough, but we have brought in one of our very favorite guests to start us off. Tell us about him.
Conor O'Neill, Deacons Illustrated. So we fall started, Joey, though, on the season previews. So this wasn't Conor. This wasn't Conor's fault. We
Yeah,
we tried. We tried to record with him, and then we have kids, and that's the whole thing.
we could go into the story, but anyone who's listened to this podcast for long enough knows what the story is already. So don't worry about it.
Yep.
Conor, welcome back. How you doing, man?
Doing well. Glad we could get this worked out. Glad that the kids are finally in bed, and we're good to go, good to rock.
That's right. Well, as a recently married man, congratulations.
Thank
Welcome.
you.
You're working your way down the path that we're already down. So you'll. I don't want to make any assumptions, but there's a chance that you'll know kind of what we're dealing with here in a few years, few short years.
There's a chance. Yep. I'll acknowledge there's a chance. Yep.
Well, welcome back once again, Conor O'Neill of Deacons Illustrated, covering the Wake Forest Steamin Deacs, and that's where we'll start. And Conor, I mentioned to you before we jumped on here that this is our first preview of preview season, and I'm going to start by asking you maybe the most boring question that we will ask anybody in this entire preview series. Dave Clawson entering his umpteenth year in Winston-Salem. I'm just assuming that everything is still as hunky-dory with him as it ever has been. The only thing I could think that might have ever made it remotely more interesting is the recent Northwestern situation. Like, he's not interested in that opening versus any others, right? Like, the plan is still he'll be in Wake Forest as long as he wants to.
Yeah. So there's some spice here because uh, I've said for longer than this, but really in the last 18 months since the Virginia Tech opening, and Dave, there's no way you'd get it on the record on this, but I think Dave used that opening to get a leverage out of Wake Forest and get more money for his assistant coaches. And that was the extension that he signed. I think it was announced the day of or the night before the season finale of BC, where they beat BC to win the Atlantic Division. Pour some out for divisions, by the way.
Yeah,
Um,
true.
so in the roughly 18 or 16 months or whatever since then, I've said that the only two openings that I'd be worried about if I was a Wake fan were Notre Dame and Northwestern. So that Northwestern comes open. Obviously,
Well,
they're
well,
not
well.
they're not trying to poach him now. I think they've already named their interim and said that they're going to wait until after the season or late in the season or whatever to target a long-term hire. Um, where it just becomes kind of a non-factor to me is, look, Northwestern, that's a train wreck right now. You're going to have to, if you're going to get an established coach, you're going to have to overpay considerably to get them in there. I don't know how much money Northwestern has and how much they're willing to throw into the football program that hasn't always been the most supported program. They're also trying to build, what is it, an $800 million stadium, something like that. I don't know how you can do that and also overpay a football coach millions upon millions of dollars. It seems like a lot of mounting factors that would dissuade a coach who is as smart as Dave Clawson and as kind of calculated as he's been with his job moves, to go there and to take over that program in his mid 50s. I don't know that he wants a reclamation project like that. The other thing that kind of pushes it over the edge of being almost a non sequitur to me is him and Pat Fitzgerald have the same agent. Brian
Ooh,
Harlan, Kevin Harlan's brother, actually is a Chicago based agent, and never had the pleasure of speaking with Brian. I was trying to get in touch with him quite frequently at the end of that 2021 season
bet you
when
were.
Virginia Tech had an opening. Kept waiting on some return calls there, but no, I just think that I cannot see a scenario where Northwestern battles and battles and battles Pat Fitzgerald's agent in court over the end of his contract, and then turns around and says, hey, let's negotiate with your other client, this Dave Clawson guy, because we want to bring him in to coach our team. Maybe that happens. I mean, I've been wrong before, but it's just it's such a cavalcade of factors that kind of push it away from Dave Clawson ever really seriously considering a move to Northwestern this year.
There's absolutely such a thing as certain organizations just like wanting nothing to do with working with certain agents, and those clients basically just being off limits at that point.
Yeah. And, the Washington Nationals just keep drafting Scott Boras clients because they're the only ones dumb enough to deal with him. And that's a curveball and a cross sport, but that's the one that I think of and go to. But yeah, I think to answer your initial question, I think Dave is in Winston-Salem for the foreseeable future. I think there's going to be a groundbreaking on their new locker room facility with all kinds of the locker room is the main thing, but it's a huge building that is built next to their indoor facility, which was also built since Clawson took over. They've made Wake such a better job since he got there in December 2013 that it's easy for the national talking heads to look at Dave and look at his situation and say, well, if this guy won at Wake Forest, then imagine what he could do elsewhere. Like, yeah, but imagine what he could do at Wake Forest. Imagine with the resources that they're actually giving him and the support they're giving him, would he really be making an upward move? And I think that's something that, every time there's an opening at one of the Big 12 or the most recent one, I think, was Nebraska. And I had Nebraska people asking me if he was going to be a fit there. And I was like, no, just no. He's got a beach house in North Carolina. Like, I guess if somebody gives him enough money, he can get private flights to the Outer Banks every year. But no, I don't see it happening anytime soon. It'd have to be a perfect situation, or it'd have to be something that, some SEC team wants to give him $8 million a year and he takes one swing at a national championship. That's kind of the only scenario. And Notre Dame looms out there.
Let's presume the whole agent part of it is just kind of an aside, right? Like, let's just say that, Northwestern would be interested in talking to Dave Clawson. Based on what you know about Dave Clawson and based on kind of Northwestern's situation in the Big Ten, where the Big Ten's obviously getting this gigantic television contract and there's going to be more money into that conference than there's really ever been before, means more money to Northwestern, which means they could pay him a lot of money. You kind of mentioned that you don't think he'd necessarily chase that job, right? But I mean, given that situation, like, do you think that would be something that would be a draw for him?
I think some of the things about the school would be a draw. I just nothing in Dave's resume and past history says that he's a guy that's going to chase a paycheck. This says that he's a guy that's going to sacrifice peace of mind and health, like mental, like I know Northwestern isn't going to be the Alabama where you have to win 10 games or you're fired type of job, but he's just not a guy that is going to pursue that just for a little bit more money in the bank account. I don't see it. Everybody has their price, and we kind of, to throw another cross sport curveball, we certainly saw that with Liv the last 2 years or so. But until it happens, I don't see it happening.
Yep. The old what was it, the $1 million man in wrestling? Everybody's got a number, everyone's got a price.
Yeah.
Nobody knows what they're going to do if they throw a big 9-10 figure check in your face. But who knows?
Yeah, and that's the thing. Like, maybe I'm setting myself up to be blindsided by this, but it's just kind of getting to know Dave and looking at the calculus of some of the previous decisions he's made. I just don't see it happening that way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. By the way, I said 9 and 10 figures. I meant like 7, maybe 8 figures. I got way over the skis there.
Billionaire Dave Clawson.
Connor, let's talk about this year's team, and I think maybe the biggest headline coming in as far as the whole country, especially the conference is concerned regarding this team, would be Sam Hartman transferring out from Wake Forest to Notre Dame. Sam Hartman, a guy who I think might have been at Wake Forest longer than we've been doing this podcast at this point, has been forever. Not really, I'm kidding, but he's been here a long time.
Feels that way.
Yeah. He paves the way. Mitch Griffis taking over. It's been a long time, I feel like, since we've seen a Dave Clawson Wake Forest quarterback come in and not look the part. Like, it seems like, from a developmental standpoint, and Mitch Griffis is going to be a third-year sophomore. Like, at this point, I would think that they've got the reps. Maybe there's a little bit of a step down, but like, is this something that you or Wake Forest fans should be concerned about coming into the year, or is this a fairly seamless transition going from several-year starter Sam Hartman into Mitch Griffis?
So the little correction there is he's actually a fourth-year guy.
You got the COVID year. Yep.
So many schools do it different with how they treat that COVID year and the eligibility clock. But Mitch this is going to be his fourth year in the program. Like, he can walk away with a degree after 1 year of being a starting quarterback. I don't know about seamless. There's certainly going to be some bumps in the road, and I think it's a little disrespectful for me to say it would be seamless based on Sam Hartman threw more touchdown passes in the ACC than anybody in its history. Maybe he only gets credit for 50% of those because they play 6 ACC teams in the regular season this year. But no, Mitch is going to be fine. He might struggle. The ramp for the season is really going to help, I think. That September, it's not going to be a breeze. It's not going to be four touchdown wins. But when you're talking about a month when your toughest game is a home game against Vanderbilt, all due respect to Georgia Tech there. I think that you could not draw up a better situation to be breaking in a new starting quarterback than that. The other factor is it's not going to be Mitch's first start. Like, he got a little bit of a taste of it last year when Sam had the blood clot. He's going to come in and, he's obviously going to be facing some stiffer competition than VMI. It's weird that his first 2 career starts are both going to be against FCS teams. So he'll have had his way against VMI, and then he'll probably have his way against the alma mater with Elon in the Thursday night opener there. But Mitch is going to run a little more than Sam, especially last year. Sam was not much of a running threat. Mitch is going to remind people not as much of Sam, definitely not as much as Jamie. I don't think Wake has anybody in the system that is going to remind people of Jamie Newman. Mitch is going to remind people of John Wolford. It's kind of that simple. Like, they're the same body type. They're kind of the same running style. They don't look the part, but once they get out in the open field, they wind up chewing up grass, and they're a little more elusive than you think they are. And that's really going to help. I mean, the 2017 season that John had really kind of elevated the standard for Wake moving forward. So Mitch is going to be fine. Like that. It's a story because it's the quarterback, and it's a story because of who he's replacing. But I think once we get a month into the season, it's going to be, okay, Wake is fine at quarterback. Mitch has a pretty firm grasp of the reins, and Wake has, the next star quarterback, and everybody will call him a system quarterback, and then Wake fans will get ornery because they do have talent, and I'll have to come down somewhere in between and say, look, Wake runs a quarterback-friendly offense, and this guy's talented, but also, hey, he's got a lot of talent around him, and Wake's offense is it makes life hard for defenses and easy for quarterbacks sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the strength of this team has to fall somewhere on the offense, right? I mean, you lose A.T. Perry at receiver, but you bring back a bunch. Donovan Green back, Taylor Marin back, Jamal Banks. Like, this is a pretty strong unit at receiver. And then at running back, Justice Ellison's back. you still have Damon Claiborne, right? This is pretty much a position agnostic, personnel agnostic offense. I feel like under Clausen, right? The offense is always going to be really good despite whatever personnel they throw out there. It really feels that way anyway.
I don't know if it'll be a 40-point a game offense. I think that's probably a bridge too far, but the quote unquote down years in the last like 5 or 6 years of Wake offense have been in that like 33 to 36 point a game range. I think this team is right there. God, the receiver depth. I don't know who else in the ACC would be jealous of Wake's receiver room at this point. Maybe Florida State has with Johnny Wilson and the incoming guy. I can't remember where he's from, but I know he's a huge alien type to put opposite Johnny Wilson. They're probably fine. I think Duke looks at their receivers and they're set with what they've got. Otherwise, I think every team in the league, Clemson included there, looks at Wake's receivers room and says, man, we could use one or two of those guys. Jamal Banks is the next.
Sorry, there was some discussion of Sam Hartman going to Notre Dame and having a worse receiver room there than he had at Wake Forest.
I kind of have no doubt about like that. That's not even breaking news to me almost. Granted, I haven't paid all that much attention to Notre Dame because they haven't been on the schedule of Wake or Duke in the last couple of years. But man, Donovan Green is a known commodity. He's a burner. Taylor Marin and Keyshawn Williams in the slot are 2 stars, and it's an offense that makes stars out of slot receivers. Jamal Banks, I had him on the breakout star watch last year, and he had 9 touchdowns, and I think only started 1 game. Had something like 45 catches for almost 700 yards, I think. Tight end, it's always funny. Wake fans love to ask why they don't throw to the tight end as much. And Wake coaches tell us consistently they don't throw to the tight end as much as when they had Cam Serenay, because when they had Cam Serenay, their receivers weren't that good. But now that they have really good receivers, they don't throw to the tight end as much. They're okay at tight end. Like Cam Height, we saw a little bit of what he could do behind Blake Whiteheart last year. I think Cam Height will be a solid starter for Wake. He's not going to be, 50 catches and challenging Brock Bowers for the Mackey Award, but he's going to give them what they need when needed. Mike, you hit the nail on the head. Like Damon Claiborne is a star in the making. That is a home run hitter in the backfield. And I honestly think the last time I could say Wake had a home run hitter in the backfield, it was Kenneth Walker III. That's a guy that every time he touches the ball, he's a threat to take it to the end zone. What will determine his play is whether he can pass block or not. That's kind of a requirement in Wake's offense. Your running back almost always winds up being a 6th blocker in the backfield. And if those guys can't pass block, they kind of don't play. So we'll see. Like that's what August is for. That's what the spring was for. But if he can get playable in that area, he's going to really help Wake Forest.
So Connor, at that point, I mean, if the offensive skill position, especially, is the strength of the team, looking at Wake Forest, I mean, historically, in at least the last couple of years, defensively, that's probably been where you've found a weakness on the team. Is that something that we expect to kind of continue going into this year? Or is that something you think might be changing with some of the new guys in the program or anything like that?
Man, it's kind of I use this often because it's Clausen's favorite band, Talking Heads. It's same as it ever was. Man, it's just you're always looking at that defense and picking out individuals that really stand out. Like this year, I can tell you, Jasheen Davis has a chance to lead the ACC in sacks. He's a pure pass rusher on the edge. I really like their safeties, Malik Mustafa and Jalen Garnes as starters, but also Brendan Harris and AJ Williams are really good behind them. Like they have great safety depth. Chase Jones has been in the program for 4 years. This is going to be his 5th. He knows what he's doing at linebacker. He's a solid linebacker. Kalen Carson has been really good at corner. but that's when he's been healthy. He's missed, I think, double-digit games in the last 2 years because of various injuries. I do think he's a pro corner when he's healthy. But you wind up just picking out individual stuff, and it's a unit that is much maligned. A lot of times when this team loses a game, it's not of the 17-10 variety where our defense played well, but our offense just couldn't get it going. It's, oh, we lost 45-42 and just couldn't get that one defensive stop to put us over the edge. And that's where I look at
last year's SP Plus, Wake 8th on offense, 97th on defense. I mean, some early 2010s Big 12 stuff going on. Like,
yeah, man, it's just you come away thinking there's talent on that side of the ball. You also come away thinking, I tend to think that your depth shows up more on defense than offense. You can get by playing a lot of guys, a lot of snaps on offense. You can't really get by doing that on defense, not for a 12-game schedule in the ACC. And Wake continues to be a program that kind of scratches together depth where they can and hopes to piece it together where they don't. And sometimes that gets exposed, sometimes it doesn't. Like sometimes you win 11 games and can make it through, like they did 2 years ago. But yeah, I look at it. I was telling you guys earlier. I mean, yeah, it matters that Sam Hartman is in a different uniform and A.T. Perry is with the Saints. They're going to have replacements for those guys. Where I worry is Kobe Turner, Deion Bergen Jr., and Tyler Williams all were basically your 3 defensive tackles that all played over 500 snaps last year. They're all gone. The top returning defensive tackle, Kevin Pointer, was kind of the 4th man in a 4-man rotation. He played significant snaps last year, but I think it was never more than 25 snaps in a game. Beyond him, you have Bryce Ganius, who is a transfer from Villanova. So you worry about moving up a level. You have Justin Williams, who is, I think, a 5th-year guy who has not really had much footing so far. You have BJ Williams, Isaiah Chaney. Like you're throwing names against the wall of guys that are either new to the program. They have a D3 transfer, Nick Helbig, that might get snaps in there for them. And you look at some of the other teams in the ACC that do well. Some of the teams that have dominated this league. Tell me a team in the last 10 years that won the ACC that didn't have good defensive tackles. So it goes beyond that. Like I got to see what new linebackers look like. I got to see them create at least one other playable corner next to Kalen Carson. A lot of question marks every year wind up being on Wake's defensive side of the ball. And I think they answer some of them in fall camp. I think some of them are probably question marks that I have right now. Like they're probably thinking they're fine at. But yeah, I look at defense and I just wonder how much is going to come together and in what spots is it not going to come together, and at what point is it going to penalize them?
Real quick, I mean, because we're talking about loss of multiple starters. I mean, there were multiple starters lost on the offensive line too, and it was an offensive line that was just kind of okay, right?
Yeah.
Some games were better than others. It was a real mixed bag last year. Does Dave Clawson feel like he has like ready-made replacements for the guys that have been lost up front on the offensive side of the ball? Because defense definitely concerned, but like I think there's a clear weakness on offense up front.
I think that's fair. I also think like they're going to get Luke Pettibone back, who was a contributor on the 21 team that won the Atlantic, and he's going to move to center. He played at the end of 21 on a partially torn ACL and missed all last season with that. He's back. They're moving him to center, so they're moving Juergens to guard. That kind of eliminates one of the guard holes you've got to fill. Then I think there is the depth to cover up the other guard spot. Tackle is the one that I have concern with. Devontae Gordon is pretty good. I'm interested to see if he stays at right tackle or moves to left. Spencer Clapp is the other tackle who you kind of pencil in there at one or the other. Spencer's a 7th-year player. Like, I covered Spencer in high school because he was in high school long enough that I was still covering high school in the Burlington area.
I was going to assume that meant you were in high school, not him, but that's
no. If nothing else, it's going to benefit you from having I think he's going to be 25. You have a 25-year-old guy playing college football. Like, that's going to help at some points. At some points, it might not, but
that's a grown man. I mean,
yeah. And the other part of it is, like, this is, with all due respect to the defensive coaches they have, but their offensive staff has been together for a decade. With the exception of tight ends and special teams coordinator Wayne Lindenberg, who's only been there, I think this is going to be his 7th year. Every other offensive position coach has been there for the full duration of Dave Clawson's tenure. So Nick Tabacca, the offensive line coach, I mean, I'm kind of shocked he hasn't been poached by somebody else because of what he's able to do with Wake's offensive linemen. And so I think that's an area you look at, and yeah, it makes sense that you would have that question, Mike. But I think the track record there, what they're able to do, what they're kind of able to get going behind the starters, I think they'll be fine there.
With the way that you're talking about the offensive line, Conor, is that the one spot on the team that you're most concerned about depth? Or, if I was asking you, where's the one position group on the team that, the starters are pretty good, but like if anybody on the starting line gets hurt, you're really concerned all of a sudden with what comes out, afterwards. Is it that offensive line, or is it somewhere else, maybe on the defense?
Probably corner/nickel. I don't know. To me, you basically have Kalen Carson and then a bunch of unknowns. I think they're going to have Evan Slocum at nickel to start with. He struggled last year in that spot, but was also brand new to it. I also think, I think quarterback is still the position on the football team that gets asked the most of, but I think nickel is number 2. Like, you're asking a guy to cover a slot receiver, but also play in the box as a run support guy. It's pretty ridiculous what the responsibilities play in and play out for those guys. And you're usually either moving an athletic linebacker there, or more often than not, you're moving a corner or a safety there. And that's what Evan Slocum's a converted safety who's going to be a nickel. Then I mentioned, like, Kalen Carson, that's the one guy you feel good about, and he has not been on the field for you every game in the last 2 years. He's missed quite a few. And then behind him, there's not a player on the roster at corner who's started multiple games in a college career. I think it's Deshaun Jones might have one start. And if I'm looking at the other names on my Athlon magazine here, Andre Hodgins, Amari Stevenson, I don't think have started games. I don't think have played any significant snaps. That's the position where Gavin Holmes transferred to Texas and J.J. Roberts transferred to, I believe it was Marshall. Those two guys were kind of up and down, and they took advantage of the transfer rules and went elsewhere. And Wake has a fresh start at corner. Like, they brought in Chip West from Syracuse, a little intra-conference transferring of a position coach there. And Syracuse had some really good corners. Like, Chip West did a nice job with Syracuse's cornerbacks the last few years. He's got a clean slate here. There should be no previous, like, bad habits to work out of guys. But I want to see the acclimation process, and beyond Kalen Carson, I don't have much of a feel for how good those guys are.
How's Wake Forest NIL game? I know we're like stepping out of personnel, but like it's kind of an interesting question for Wake specifically, just because size of the school, right? I feel like, Wake Forest is, on the smaller side in the Power 5, if not the smallest, right? In terms of just overall student population, that sort of thing.
Yeah, it's the smallest.
Yeah. So like, how's NIL factoring into the roster turnover at Wake? And do you see that as like something that, might concern Dave Clawson more than like other coaches elsewhere because of where he's coaching?
I mean, it's there. Wake typically isn't in the recruiting battles where they're fighting off Miami's $200,000 offer or whatever it is.
Right.
Like they held on to Micah Mays. It's a high 3-star. I think maybe somebody has him as a 4-star receiver coming in this year. He took I think an 11th hour visit to Miami, or an unofficial to Miami late last season, and Wake hung on to him. The NIL, like Wake had a few false starts by alums that I think wanted to help, but were not as organized as they needed to be. And then last Thanksgiving was really when they got their collective off the board with Roll the Quad, and it has the backing of I think of the 8 names of founders that were thrown out there, I think 7 of them have names on buildings at Wake. It's that kind of backing with it. I don't know, man. I have such little desire to report on NIL and to wade into those waters, because there's every incentive people have to lie, and I almost want to start cursing, and I'm not going to do that here, but it's all liar's poker. Like, everybody wants to say, oh yeah, our guy's getting this much, and there's no incentive to tell the truth. Like, and
Yeah.
I'm not about to go digging through the financial records of 20-year-olds to figure out how much their W-2s are, W-99s or whatever those would be. Like, that's just not what I want to do. So, like, to switch the sport up in basketball, they got a big commit from Juke Harris out of Salisbury, and I was there for his commitment ceremony, and just straight up asked him, because the other teams on his list, Kansas was in there, Miami was in there. Like, it's the guys you hear about. So I wanted to know how much of a factor NIL was, and just straight up asked him, and he said, no, it wasn't a factor at all. He might be lying to me. Like, that might be a 17-year-old kid just telling me exactly what he was coached to say, or it might be a kid that legitimately wants to go to Wake Forest, and that kind of thing doesn't enter his mind. So I don't know. Man, my desire to report on NIL or anything like it is minimal.
Yeah, preaching to the choir. I feel obligated to ask, but I'm
like
I feel the same way.
I love the kids can make money. Like, yeah. I think that they should make all the money that they
agree.
They can.
Agree.
But that doesn't mean that I have to pay any attention to it and write about it.
Yeah.
I mean, that's like absolute chasing your tail kind of stuff, right? Like, it's, it's great that they're able to make money, but like you're saying, I mean, it's just full of lying, and there's no reason that anybody has to be truthful about any of this stuff. Yeah. I mean, there's no dotted line to sign on to until you've agreed exactly where you're going to transfer, and you're already there. And yet it's being used to try to get people into the portal to begin with, which just feels like the biggest, like, absolute garbage that I've ever, like, it's ridiculous.
Yeah.
Let's take a quick second to remind you about Section103.com. It is the internet's premier place for all things wonderful, wonderful Georgia Tech apparel. They have t-shirts, sweatshirts, hoodies. They got a couple of three-quarter shirts. They got buttons, stickers, all sorts of things. Things for men, women, children, something for the whole family. Every Georgia Tech fan in your life can use something from Section103.com. Use promo code GOACC for 10% off your first order. They've got some new things all the time coming. Recently came out with some new player shirts, shirzies, I guess as the kids would call them. Things with a logo on the front, a number on the front, and a number on the back, along with a name. They got shirts for both Zach Pyron as well as Dante Smith, who kind of project to be Georgia Tech's starting quarterback and running back this year. So if you want to support those players, I believe they get some NIL money out of it too. So just, keep that in mind for what it's worth. They've got the Juniors Grill shirt. They've got all sorts of great products there. They've also recently come out with a clearance section. So if you're looking for some t-shirts or a couple of hoodies for a slightly lower price point, go check out the clearance section. Once again, it is Section103.com. or at section_103 on Instagram. Give them a follow. Check it out. All things wonderful Georgia Tech apparel. Again, using the official team colors, the official word marks, everything. It is all officially licensed. It is super comfortable, super high quality. I love mine. You will love yours as well. Check out the performance wear if you're looking for things to keep you cool here during the summer. In any case, one more time, that is section103.com, the internet's best place for all things wonderful Georgia Tech apparel. That's it for now. Let's get back to the show. So anyways, on that note, Connor, let's take a look at the schedule for Wake Forest this fall. Out of conference, as you mentioned, kind of a nice little runway to start with. At home against Elon, at home against Vanderbilt, at Old Dominion. And then later in the year, almost at the end of the year, at Notre Dame in late November. But then the ACC schedule, as mentioned, no divisions anymore. So as a reminder, we're just kind of playing whoever, whenever, depending on when the ACC says to play them. Wake is home against Georgia Tech, at Clemson, at Virginia Tech, home against Pittsburgh, home against Florida State, at Duke on a Thursday, home against NC State, at Notre Dame, as mentioned, and then at Syracuse. This feels, you get probably the two toughest teams in the ACC. You're missing out on UNC, one of the out of conference games you've played the last couple of years. I don't know. How do you grade this in terms of difficult, easy, workable, especially considering what we've talked about, a certain amount of personnel reset kind of year?
The funny thing to me with every ACC team schedule discussion is if you're an Atlantic team not named Clemson and Florida State, you look at whether they still have to play Clemson and or Florida State and determine, oh, they got shafted or, oh, they got lucky here. Then if you're a coastal team, you look at whether they play Clemson and Florida State now. And if they do, then they got shafted. And if they don't, they got lucky. So that's my thing with Wake being a former Atlantic team. They have to see those teams again. They have beaten Florida State the last three meetings. They skipped a year in 2020. Florida State backed out of a December game. They did not want to play. But
you put that eloquently. I appreciated that.
Yeah, they gave Wake Forest I think it was about 28 hours more notice than they gave Clemson, and was it Virginia, the other one that they backed out on?
Virginia, it was like day of the game, essentially. It was like the morning of on game day it broke.
Clemson was game day too.
Yeah.
Yep. Good times there. But it's not easy. It's certainly not easy. The one I'll give you, when the schedule comes out, one of the first things I look at is where the off week is. Dave Clawson loves having that thing in the middle of the season. So I see that it's in September, and then you play 8 games in a row. That's a little rougher than it usually gets. That runway is going to help. You're going to pay some karma on the back end of it, though, with you're probably playing the weakest ACC team on your schedule there, September 23rd against Georgia Tech. And then coming out of the off week with trips to Clemson and Virginia Tech, I know what Virginia Tech was last year. I also know that Wake, I don't have the numbers off the top of my head. Wake does not play well in front of crowds of more than 50,000 people. I know even down years, Lane Stadium can fill up. So, I look at a mid-October game at Virginia Tech. People might, I can imagine, would still be pretty interested at that point in seeing year 2 of Brent Pry. You guys can tell me if I'm wrong there, but I think that'll be a pretty loud place. I'm of the mind that I just don't know when Wake can win at Clemson. I've gone down there and seen them get shell-shocked by that atmosphere too many times to think that it's going to happen. It's one of those, I'll believe it when I see it. I don't think that Wake is just going to go 0 for the rest of time at Clemson. I just don't know when it's going to happen. At least when Clemson is at this level with Dabo. Then the fun part is you come home and play 2 of the most physical teams in the ACC. Pitt and Florida State, that's going to be no joke. You might be looking at an 0-4 month in October, and Wake under Dave Clawson has typically been really good in October. It's November when they really struggle. But October is usually a pretty kind month to the Deacs. And that's an October that I look at and say, man, they if they come out of there 2-2, if it's the right two, then they're gonna be kind of happy. The quick turnaround and the trip to Duke, Wake fans are none too happy about having to go to Duke for back-to-back years, and I kind of don't blame them. Duke is at a much different point program-wise than I think we thought they would be at last year at this time. And you're looking at November, like I said, Wake does not play well in November. It goes back to what I'm talking about with the depth concerns. And there's usually at least one or two positions on the team that you're looking at and saying, man, how in the world are they going to piece this together for 50 to 80 plays in this game this week? 3 road games, one of them being at Notre Dame, the other being at Syracuse. That's not going to be a fun month either. So, yeah, this schedule was not done with the best intentions for Wake Forest purposes. I think it's fair to say that.
Oh man. I mean, the bye before going to Clemson is good, I feel like, because I mean, you mentioned Dave Clawson doesn't love having the bye in the middle of the schedule, but I think if you're going to put it towards the front of the schedule, having it the week before going on the road to Clemson is probably a good thing.
Telling you, you gotta join me on my hill. Having teams play worse coming out of the off week than they do having that FCS game.
Yeah.
I'll have to refresh the numbers on that one, but Dave's actually the one that's been pretty vocal about that, and I've gotten into the numbers because of his vocalization of it. But I mean, that's why the SEC pays those FCS teams $1.5 and $2 million to play their games against them on that second to last week of November.
SoCon Saturday.
Yeah,
SoCon Saturday. Yep.
It's better to have that warm-up game than have a complete week off.
I feel. Go ahead, Joey. Sorry,
I'm just looking at the sequencing. Looking at the sequencing. Yeah, I mean, like you mentioned, Connor. I mean, it's games in a row. Clemson, I would call that tough. Virginia Tech, maybe less tough. Pittsburgh, tough. Florida State, tough. Duke, maybe. NC State, maybe. And Notre Dame, definitely. Like that's, there's not a lot of rest for the weary in there for sure. Especially in the 2 games that I said maybe are in-state rivals, right? So like, plenty of extra emotion there. So that's
in-state rivals that beat you last year. Duke by 3 in a regular season finale Thanksgiving week, and State in a night game there by 9, and it was closer than that. Yeah, man, and those are big 4 games that Dave Clawson and John Curry have made no secrets that they really want to win. Like, they'll give you the company line of every game matters the same. Every game counts for 1. They want to go 1-0 and every week, blah, 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 yada, yada, yada. They really want to beat the big 4 teams. Like that is who Wake is. They are the overlooked team of the state more often than not. Like, you not only have State, Carolina, and Duke that can tend to get more attention than Wake, but they're also competing with App State up the mountain and ECU down east. They really want to win the in-state games, and having those 2 back-to-back, that's going to make for a pretty interesting start to November.
What are you thinking record prediction-wise?
I tell you what, I think this season is going to test this program's floor. They have a 7-year bowl streak that I'm not prepared to say, guarantee it ends and say they're going to go 3-9 or 4-8 or something crazy like that. I just think this season is going to test Wake's floor as a program. 10th year under Dave Clawson, replacing a lot of key components. I don't know if this team has it in them to compete at the top of the ACC. But I think that there are scenarios where this team does not make a bowl game. You want a
fair.
specific record. You want a specific record out of me, don't you?
It's everything you said was fair, but yeah.
I'll land on 6-6. Um, I think they're going to go 4-0 in September. Like, I think those first four are going to fall their way. Then I look at the rest of the schedule, and I'm probably shortchanging them. Like, I think if they're good enough to go 4-0 in September, I don't think they're bad enough to go 2-6 the rest of the way. I'm probably giving a little bit too much credit to the opponents and not enough to Wake. Been guilty of that in the past, but I do look at that back 2/3 of the schedule and say, man, if they go 4-4 through this 8, that'd be a pretty decent season. So finishing 8-4, 7-5, I think that would be a pretty decent season. And then it becomes a matter of who you're bringing back the next year and what have you set yourself up to do in 24.
What do you think, Joey?
I'm kind of leaning with Connor or that like 6-6 mark. One of the things that I've learned over the years is that, if I look through the schedule and I start picking win, loss, whatever, if I'm looking at Wake Forest in particular, I am doing myself a disservice if I don't add a win somewhere in there, because this is just historically such a well-coached team that they are going to pick someone off that I don't think they are. Out of conference, I think being conservative, I think 2-2, getting that Vanderbilt game at home, I think probably helps. Vandy was better last year than I think we thought they would be, but are they like a definite loss at this point for Wake Forest? I don't think so. That's definitely winnable, but let's just be conservative and say 2-2. And then can they go 4-4 in conference? Yeah, probably. I think there's enough winnable games here. And again, it's not like Wake has ever really, in our experience in this podcast, ever really been a pushover. They will win games. They can go toe to toe with the likes of Pitt and NC State, and I think they should be favored probably against Duke or against Syracuse. We'll see with Georgia Tech. I think they probably are favored at home against Georgia Tech there in late September. And then who can they pick off from there? So yeah, I think 6-6 is probably reasonable. I think there's a non-zero chance to go like 7-5. I think that's on the table with historically what we've seen here. But as mentioned, there are definitely questions about some of the personnel grouping, some of the losses, so some of it might come down to what kind of injuries are there or aren't there. But I'll conservatively say 6-6 for now, Mike. What about you?
So the one extra win because of Stave Clausen, I'm gonna say 7-5. And the reason why I say 7-5 is I look through the schedule. There are a lot of teams that have a lot of questions, right? Georgia Tech, it's year one, right? With Brent Key, Virginia Tech, year two with Pry, even though it's kind of a tough stretch going to Clemson, then to Blacksburg. That's a tough schedule draw, but enough questions there. Pittsburgh's got Phil Dracovic at quarterback. What version of that are we going to see, right? Is it going to be the 2020 version of Dracovic, or is it going to be the one that's banged up and then when he's healthy isn't really all that good? Or what version of quarterback are we getting there? Florida State they're going to be a machine. Duke, a little better than we thought, but there might be a little payback factor there, right? NC State, again, you're pairing Brandon Armstrong with Robert Anae as the OC, so that's going to be really intriguing to see kind of what NC State looks like. But again, that's a new offensive coordinator, that's a new quarterback adapting to a system he used to play in, but at a new place. Notre Dame, it's going to be their senior day, right? End of November. That's a really tough game, but also
in South Bend. Yeah.
In South Bend, but it's not like Notre Dame's not without some questions at receiver. You play against Sam Hartman, but receiver wise, what did they look like there? And then at Syracuse, yeah, you're going to the Carrier Dome. But also, what does Syracuse look like offensively without Robert Anae now as the OC? Because now you're kind of going to Jason Beck, and that could be fine, right? Or it could be something a little bit different. Sean Tucker's gone. right? If there's anything that we learned from the bowl game, the Pinstripe Bowl last year, it's that, oh, they're not afraid to throw the ball with Garrett Schrader like 51 times. It was 15 more than his career high in that Pinstripe Bowl. So if that's the version of Syracuse we're going to throw out there, I'm not sure you want Garrett Schrader throwing the ball 50 times a game. And if that's what they're going to do, I'm not sure maybe I'm wrong, but I'm not sure that's going to be like a winning proposition for them all year. So it's tough to go to a Carrier Dome, but also like I'm not sure how good Syracuse is going to be. I
And
think
does Dino Babers make it to Thanksgiving as head coach? I don't know.
It's fair. So there's definitely questions and up and down the schedule, and I just think there's enough for Wake to get to 7 even with the questions they have. I just think that offensively, they're just too much of a known commodity. I think they're just going to score enough, right? Quite frankly, against some of these teams that have a lot of questions on the offensive side of the football. So if you get into those higher scoring games, like can some of these teams on the back half of the schedule I just talked about with like questions on offense, can they keep up? Like Virginia Tech's got basically entirely new offense. Can they keep up? Like probably not. Duke, can they keep up? Like if last year's version of Duke shows up, maybe, right? But they got some stuff they're replacing too. So there's some questions. I think that I think Wake can get to 7.
The thing you got to remember about the 2 games in November, like NC State has not. I think NC State's won once in Winston-Salem in the past like 20 some years, and that's been every year. Like it's not a play once and take 3 years off that series. That series has been going since 1910. And
House of Horrors situation.
Yeah, it's just House of Horrors situation. Like even Jim Grobe's last year when everything was sour, NC State came there and Wake found a way to beat them and give Jim Grobe I think that might have been Jim Grobe's last win at Wake against a pretty sultry NC State team. And then weird happens in the Carrier Dome. I couldn't hold off on language on that one, but yeah. And I see the at Syracuse to end the season, and I immediately think of 2019. Wake had a really good season. It kind of got off the rails at the end of the year. They went to the Carrier Dome for that last regular season game, and Wake lost by 9 in overtime. And you want to ask how that happens, you have Syracuse kick a field goal and then intercept a pass and return it for a touchdown against Sam Hartman on the back half of overtime. So yeah, that's a weird game, and I hesitate to predict anything about it just because something weird is going to happen in that one.
Yep.
Man, that was 8-3 Wake against 4-7 Syracuse in that game. Man, that's rough.
It was a weird senior day. God, I don't even remember who started at quarterback for Syracuse, but that was just
that was
one. Dungy?
Oh, sorry.
No, Dungy was gone. I love Dungy. I think I had him as a first team All ACC quarterback his last season there, 2018.
18, yeah.
But yeah.
Let's see. Hold on.
DeVito?
Working on it.
Rex Culpepper?
Something named Welch?
No, yeah.
Names.
Yeah, Welch. Yeah. It was like a charity start on senior day, and he somehow beat an 8-win Wake Forest team that had been in the CFP rankings like a month before. It was not fun to ask questions after that game.
Yeah, that was a combo Sam Hartman, Jamie Newman game. Tommy DeVito threw 3 passes in that game. I don't know, was he hurt or something like that? I don't know. It's been a long time ago.
Yeah, it was a weird. It was
Rex,
a weird.
You said Rex Culpepper. My God, that gave me some nightmare.
I don't know why that name was rattling in my head.
My God,
Wake played an overtime game up there since then. The AT Perry game where AT had 3 catches and all of them were touchdowns. That was 2021. So,
my goodness.
Yeah.
Well, I'm sure nothing could go wrong in that game this year. Last game of the season, and in the Carrier Dome or the JMA Wireless Dome.
That's the Carrier Dome. Come on.
Yeah, always.
Oh yeah. Don't got to tell me twice. All right, so I think we all got Wake Forest probably going bowling. I'll take that. I think that's a pretty good reset year if I do say so myself.
That's the way I look at this, man. I don't think anybody expects them to compete for an ACC championship. It's if they do, great. Some things would have to fall their way, and they would have to take advantage of the schedule in some way that we don't see possible right now, obviously. But yeah, I think this kind of becomes a bridge year, and then I think it's okay. How many pieces can you bring back, and what young players can you get ready to step into large roles in 2024, and can you then jump on an opportunity to play at the top of the conference?
Mike, I'm good if you are.
Bridge year is a bowl game. That's good.
I would take that every time.
Our bridge year in Blacksburg is scraping our way to 3 wins. So,
oh man, there's like 86 teams out of 133 that go to bowls. It's pretty hard to miss one.
Yeah, trust me, Virginia Tech's found a way.
It's been a minute on my end too. Don't worry.
Yep.
Haven't seen a bowl game since 2018.
This is good.
Yikes.
Yeah, it's Wake's 3 repeat opponents every year: Georgia Tech, Virginia Tech, and Duke. It's 2 second-year coaches and a first-year coach, and one of the second-year coaches looks like he has a head start on the other 2.
Yeah. I mean, that was a clear, Mike Elko at Duke, I assume is who we're talking about.
Yeah.
that was a clear ACC Coach of the Year situation last year.
Yeah.
But like when those pairings are announced, you look at it and it's like, man, Wake's 3 repeat opponents. I mean, they're not going to juice the needle for fans. Like, fans all want to see NC State or Carolina every year, but you look at it and you start thinking like, they're going to get this guy at Georgia Tech is probably going to be gone, and he was gone a month into the season, and then they're getting 2 first-year guys who like they've got some work to do building programs back. Just one of them was bound to do well, and it was Mike Elko at Duke, and just happens to be the former Wake Forest defensive coordinator.
But, yeah, that's a great point. Yeah, totally forgot about that. Yeah,
but yeah, I mean, if you're picking 3 teams to start with, playing every year for the next 4, those ones kind of set you up, at least at the start of it.
It's not exactly a murderer's row.
No, that's exactly.
Oh man, I just now realized if those are your 3 permanent opponents, and you get Clemson and Florida State this year, you don't get either of them next year.
No, they have Clemson again next year, I think. They take a break from FSU, but I think Wake still has Clemson next year. They still have NC State next year, and then they go 2 years without seeing them.
Oh, all right.
I think if I'm remembering, I know for a fact the NC State one is the next 2 years they get them, and then they take 2 years off, because I've done the research with the whole. It's like the second longest continuous rivalry being played, or in the South, or something like that. So, but yeah,
right.
There's some funky mixing and matching going on there, where it's not like broken up like you think it is.
I blame John Swafford for this somehow.
It's fair. No further questions, Your Honor. Yeah.
Blame him for whatever we want.
I think that's the fight song of NC State fans.
Everything. It's Swafford's fault. Yeah, there you go. That's good. All right, Connor, at the risk of me singing anymore, this has been a lot of fun. I appreciate you coming on. Do you want to tell the people where they can find you real quick?
Yeah, that's Conor O'Neill on what's left of Twitter. I'm still going to call it Twitter. Conor O'Neill, 1 N, 2 L's, _DI. My Wake Forest coverage can be found at wakeforest.rivals.com. Love to have people check it out.
So by the time this comes out, this might be like x.com/Conor O'Neill _DI apparently, but we don't have to get into that, I guess.
I'm on Twitter until it burns down, and then I guess I'll pick Threads or Blue Sky or Mastodon or whatever the hell it is. But
Blue Sky, forgot about that one. God,
I wouldn't know. I haven't been invited yet.
Yeah.
Anyways, Conor, you're the man. Really appreciate you coming on here.
Thanks, guys. I appreciate it.
Yep. Mike, let's get out of here. We're going to come back, keep previewing some teams. In the meantime, we are on Twitter at FTRSJoey, at Mike McDaniel SI, at BC Podcast ACC, and once again, at Conor O'Neill _DI to go find all of Conor's good stuff. And once again, at wakeforest.rivals.com for all of his wonderful coverage of the Steamin Deacs. We are on Spotify, on iTunes, on all the good places you can go find podcasts. We're on YouTube. Go find us there. Hit the subscribe button. We appreciate that. Mike, you want to tell me where they can find us on the social medias?
Facebook.com/basketball conference. Rate, review, and you'll find this podcast on there. I can't promise about any of the other ones.
This one for sure. You can also do it for the gram at BC Podcast ACC. We're on there too. So go find us there.
Yep.
Did I forget anything, Mike? Is that it?
It's like riding a bike. I think you did great.
I'm so close to falling off. So let's get out of here before I totally lose the plot. Mike, this has been fun. You want to come back and preview some more teams?
Yeah, we got to do what was it, 13 more?
Yes. Yeah. 13 more. And we've got almost a month to do it. So we're in good shape here. I think we're in good.
We're doing what we usually do. Timing wise. Yeah.
Right on schedule. Schedule.
Right until week 0 we release these. So
that's right.
Gotcha.
Mike, it's been fun. We'll talk soon.
Yep.
Connor, thanks again. Thanks so much for coming on. We'll talk to you again soon. All right.
Appreciate it.
Yep. All right. For that guy, Mr. Mike McDaniel, for Mr. Conor O'Neill, I am, and also for producer Scott, by the way, he's here too. I am Joey Weaver. Thank you guys so much for listening. We will talk to you again soon. And until then, go ACC.